right, this time I was allowed to record. How great. Well, happy Monday morning, everyone. No big overall announcements from me, but I know Sean, you have some exciting things to share.
Yes, I do. So let's see if I can just take a few minutes at the beginning of the top here. I'll share my screen and steal the thunder. Um, where am I going to start first? Let's go all the way over here. Cool. So FEP3 became a thing recently. We formally merged that. And what I wanted to show today is first the fact that it has been formally released and is on the website. I announced that last time. Now there's this blog post if you want to check out more information about it. And what's new here is there is a support page now that exists for it. Um, you can get here just by going on to the FEPS page, which lists the ones that exist there. And down here, there's a new subpages part. Boom. And what I'm putting on here is basically the same thing that you see on the Spec Zero website. We've got this support timeline that shows where we are in the support windows for different of the packages. And then below it is the drop and adoption schedule. Something that's different with this table as opposed to the Spec Zero one is we have this adopt support for because we try to grab things within 6 months of them being released and they only have the drop dates. And what's cool about this is that this gets automated. This gets updated in an automated way every week. So I don't have to do anything about this. Just a GitHub Actions thing will run that will regenerate the Gantt chart here and put on any new stuff in the table that needs to be there. In addition to that, people who are on the PyHC mailing list will start getting emails like this quarterly. And I may be curious, did anyone get an email like this? And were you surprised to see it last week?
Did I?
Maybe, maybe not. Well, for
Yeah, I
anyone
did. That was
subscribed,
really cool.
good. I'm glad someone did. This will start coming out 4 times a year, just saying what you can adopt and drop support for. And again, what's nice is that it pulls straight from the markdown file that generates this, and GitHub Actions is what's sending the email. So I don't have to think about this at all. It'll just happen. And then in addition to that, FEP3 has been encouraging people to adopt Spec Zero and have more aligned version dependencies. And the PyHC environment is now actually fully Spec Zero slash FEP3 compliant, which is exciting. This giant spreadsheet here is the last one we had when we weren't. I added some highlighting functionality to get little yellow highlights when something was not within compliance, and NumPy was our last package that was holding out. We couldn't quite switch over to NumPy 2 yet. There was one remaining package that had that requirement. They removed it last week, and now this is just a sea of green in the spreadsheet showing our dependency lists. And now I'm starting to think about ways to keep the environment this way now that we've done so good to get here. And I've got ideas to work on starting this week for making little GitHub action scripts that people can drop into their repos to, you know, check a compatibility with the PyHC environment. Basically, like, is your package compatible with these ranges over here on the left? And some spec zero checks. If you're about to get out of date with one of the packages, you could have a warning, every time you push a change or open a PR to know that in advance. So anyway, I'm excited about that. It's good for package interoperability and woohoo.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yep.
I'll check my email.
Excellent. Well, that's all the notifications I had. Julie, did you have any announcements today?
No, no big announcements for the crowd right now.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks for hopping on and letting us know. All right.
Very welcome.
Nick, feel free to take it away.
Cool. The main event. All right. I'll share the stuff and I'm going to try to I put a thing in the links in the chat and I'm going to try to share my screen. If I disappear, I'll be back shortly. Okay. Showing up?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Once in a while, my computer sort of locks or crashes when I try to share screens over Zoom. So always a tad nervous. But thanks everyone. And today we're going to talk about a topic which is very dear to my heart. It's not actually very dear to my heart, but it's a way to do a whole bunch of automated code quality checks and make a lot of automated code quality fixes at once. And this is with a framework called Precommit. Is the font size adequate?
I can read it.
Yeah, I can see it even on a phone.
Whoa, okay, cool. All right, so I put a link in the tutorial or in the chat for the tutorial repo and then also instructions on how to use UV, since we're going to use that for one step as opposed to probably 13 steps that I do otherwise to create a simple Python package. So pre-commit is a way, the website defines it as a framework for managing and maintaining multi-language pre-commit hooks. And pre-commit means before using Git to commit a change. And a hook in the context of pre-commit. Um, so in general, a hook is something that gets run when a certain event happens. In pre-commit, it specifically refers to, in most cases, an automated code quality check that often makes automated fixes. And a really neat thing that if you are working on a tool with a bunch of people, you're able to configure these checks in the same way for all contributors. Using pre-commit is really helpful for not just people who are working on core PyHC packages, but I'd say like most people who use GitHub to use or use only just Git uh, to work on code projects in languages like Python. So the first thing that we can do is install UV. And if you wanted to, we could do pip install UV, but I'm not going to do that. Or UV pre-commit. But I'm going to press Control C so I don't actually run that. And the next thing I'm going to do is use UV to install pre-commits. So let's do UV tool install pre-commit. What this command does for someone who doesn't have pre-commit installed is it installs pre-commit as essentially like a global tool for you to use. So you don't have to activate a virtual environment or anything to use it. Pre-commit is there. All right, and you can also do pip install pre-commit if you would like. And I'm going to Control C that also because I don't want to do that. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to use UV for is to initialize a Python project. And this is the shortcut that is saving us a bunch of time by installing UV. So if we want to create a basic Python project with UV, we use a command UV init pre-commit demo. Where pre-commit demo is the name of the project. And I'll press enter, and it says initialize project pre-commit demo at this subdirectory. So I will do cd pre-commit demo. And to see what is in there, we can do ls. And we see this command creates a gitignore file. I'll do a ls-aa. Oh, it's probably not working because I have an alias. But it's initializing a Git repository. So this is now a Git repository with a gitignore. It has a pyproject.toml, the configuration file for a Python package, a main.py file, which contains the stuff that you want to run, and something which says what Python version the project is. So the main reason why I'm doing this is to have a few files to work with and to not make us need to set up pyproject.toml from scratch. All right. One thing to note about pre-commit is that it runs on files that Git knows about. So if the files are not recorded in the Git history, then pre-commit won't work on them. So let's do git add dot and then git commit -m run uv init. All right, so it did stuff, and I'll type my favorite git command, git status, to show that we're on branch main and we've committed everything. All right. So if we want to add a code quality check to pre-commit, there are usually a couple of steps. The first is to open a configuration file called .precommitconfig.yaml. And then we go to a GitHub repository or documentation site for a project and copy and paste the pre-commit hook that they have pretty much as is that you need it. And then you can paste the hook into the configuration file. And sometimes you do need to fix formatting for that. The pre-commit organization has a pre-commit hooks repository, and I'll put a link to this in the chat again. That has, so this repository, pre-commit hooks, has a bunch of out-of-the-box hooks, like trailing white space will remove white space at the end of lines, and check added large files will make sure that you're not getting large files committed. And then other things like check TOML will make sure that TOML files have the correct syntax, and all sorts of things like that. So we're going to open pre-commit config.yaml, and I'll do that at the root level of this repository. So emacs.precommit config.yaml. Good, it worked. This font might be just a little too small. In the next line, or next block, I have a sample pre-commit hook. And this repost thing you only need once. And then you say the repository that it comes from. In this case, it's the repository that we just went to, the version number, and then the name of the hook. And this is a really useful one. So I'm going to copy it and then paste and save it. And then do cat precommit config.yaml. And this is just a little bit too small. I'll do that again. And because I don't have an extra line. So what this check is doing is making sure that the file is a valid Python file, is checking what's called the abstract syntax tree. And that's something that Python uses to figure out like what the structure of a file is. And a file has to have a valid abstract syntax tree to work with Python. So this check essentially makes sure that the code in .py files are valid Python files. So let's do a git add.precommit config.yaml and git commit -m. So let's say initialize precommit with check abstract syntax tree. Okay. So now that that's added, we can run pre-commits. So let's do pre-commit run -- all files. it's going to take a moment to install hooks. And like it says, once it's installed, the environment will be reused. And if you have a whole bunch of hooks, this might take a while with pre-commit, but you only have to do this once unless you upgrade a hook or add more hooks. So it gives you something where it says check Python asked abstract syntax tree, and it says passed. So there's a chance that if you're following along, it says skipped. And the most likely reason for this is that if the hook was skipped, like the files have not been committed with Git. So going back to this step, so git add dot and then git commit, all the things. All right. So pre-commit run all files. This command is one that I use really, really often. It's the main way that I end up using pre-commit. So let's add a few more built-in hooks to the configuration file. So let's open the configuration file again. emacs.precommit, and I'll use tab completion. And let's add a few more. So we're going to add the ID of trailing white space, then ID of check merge conflict. This is a useful one for if there's a git merge conflict that you're trying to commit. ID check case conflict. That one makes sure that, if I type it correctly, that there aren't any uppercase, lowercase ambiguities in file names. And then we have a toml file. So let's do check toml and then ID check YAML for checking YAML files. So I'll do this and then save it. And then I'll type do cat pre-commit again. So this is the status of the file now. It's hopefully identical to this. And now we can run pre-commit again. So pre-commit run dash dash all files. And it does a whole bunch of things. And one of the checks failed, which was trim trailing white space. So in a file, I had some trailing white space and it fixed that. So it says that files were modified by this hook. All right. And if we wanted to, we could run only a single hook. So in the configuration file, there are different hooks, like different hook IDs that you get from the documentation of this repository. And you can run one of the IDs. So pre-commit run, and let's do trailing white space, then dash dash all files. And in this case, it made the change, so it passed. And we can do git status to see that one file was changed. And I think that was the one that had the trailing white space in it. And git diff to see the things that I added or that were changed. All right. So one of the most essential pre-commit hooks. Oh, yeah, first, are there any questions or thoughts that anyone would like to share or perspectives? All right, and please feel free to bring things up in the chat also.
Nick, I got a question. Do you need a live internet connection to be able to run pre-commit? I'm thinking like if I'm on a plane or something and I want to work, how does that work? Because I see in the pre-commit.yaml file, it's referred to URLs.
You shouldn't need to do it if you have set up the hooks already. So what I often do before going on a plane, if I am planning to work, is do to run like pre-commit on all files. So I'll run this command and it will install everything, and then they'll be there for working on the plane. So that on the plane, I can feel bad when I instead watch episodes of um, Star Trek Lower Decks or whatever instead of working like I thought I would. So you shouldn't need a internet connection as long as you aren't as long as you've run pre-commit with all of the hooks and they got installed previously. I don't know that for sure, but it's very likely that that's the case. Good question. All right. So the next thing is rough pre-commit. So rough is a tool that does auto formatting and it performs a lot of Python code quality checks. It looks for a lot of um, anti-patterns, ways to improve the code, and as well as reformat it. Um, whoops, I lost it. There. So I'll open the rough pre-commit repository. And so this is the Astral SH rough pre-commit. I'll put the link to that in the chat as well. And a way to figure out how to set up rough and pre-commit would be to do a web search for rough pre-commit, which is usually my standard practice. So in this, it has some checks. So it has ID for rough check and then ID for rough format. So rough check will do the code quality checks and rough format will format the code. And with rough, there are ways to do automated code quality fixes beyond the auto formatting. And to do that, we want to add an argument, which is dash dash fix. So the way that you add arguments to a pre-commit hook is with the args field. All right, so I'm going to copy this and then open emacs.precommit config.yaml again, tab completion, and then paste this again and save it. One thing to note is that when you look on a repository for pre-commit, generally it'll start with the repos field. And this only needs to be said once in a file. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this and then save it. And then I'll do a git add.precommit config.yaml, git commit -m, add more pre-commit awesome hooks of awesomeness. All right, then git status. So everything's committed and we're clean. Though I do have a shortcut, I set up my prompt to have different emojis for different git statuses. That was a fun day.
Hey Nick, this is Joy. I had a question.
Oh, hi, Joy.
Everything is being committed locally to your lab, to your working, I'm guessing
Yes.
desktop or computer, right? Only so
Yes.
far.
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm following along.
Yeah, so I haven't done anything with a GitHub repository yet. We'll get there. All right. So let's see. Oh, and sometimes it's worth thinking about the order that you put the hooks in. So if you have things that change Python code, generally you want to do the auto formatting last. So I generally run rough format kind of later on. All right. So there's also a nuance that sometimes, in rare occasions, you'll have a pre-commit hook that changes something and another hook that changes it back to the way that it was. And with that, you have to be careful about the configuration. So it's usually a case-by-case basis. Right. So we can run this. Pre-commit run all files. And it'll do more fun installation steps. This might take just a tad longer. And then it ran everything and everything passed. All right. And let's see, this is not actually my tutorial. So, okay. So right now, the only way that we've run pre-commit is by doing a command line command to run pre-commit. There is a way to install it that will make it so that all of these hooks will get run on the files that you're attempting to commit before you attempt to commit it. This is not the way that I usually do it, but let's go through this process anyway. Where was it? Okay. Pre-commit install is a command. So pre-commit install. And now it says that pre-commit is installed at .git/hooks pre-commit. And what the git hooks directory is the place where all these different git hooks get set up. So if you want something that customizes a code quality check, does something or other, prepare a commit message or something like that, it would get set up in this git hooks directory. All right. So let's open main.py. So this is the Python file that we had. And we can delete everything that's there. It doesn't matter too much right now. And let's add some code that has some obvious formatting errors. And then another problem that we'll find out moderately soon. So let's do git diff. And so this is the current change that we're attempting to commit. Now let's do git add main.py. And let's attempt to commit this. Git commit -m attempt commit. And it says that rough format failed. So let's do git status. So it's saying that there are some changes in main.py that we were attempting to commit, but this file has been modified since we did the git add command. And we can check to see what the changes were by git diff. In this case, we see that git diff removed that extra white space and made the formatting less horrible. But we need to do git commit again, git add and git commit again, git add main.py. And now let's do git diff -- cached. And it's saying that we deleted the stuff that was already there. And now we're adding only the fixed code. So now let's do git commit -m add function to main.py. And this time we fixed everything and it worked. And though we had some files that we do have a pyproject.toml file, this hook was skipped because we didn't attempt to change that file. So when you install pre-commit, it'll only run on the files that got changed. All right. So let's do git status to make sure that we're clear. And because I do that all the time anyway.
Question, Nick, what happens if you didn't run git add cache? Git diff
I
cache.
think you would still get a pre-commit error that wouldn't let you commit. I don't know that for sure, but I'm fairly sure that that's the way that it goes. All right. So the rough linter has a bunch of different code quality checks that can be enabled, a whole list of them. And we're going to add a section to our pyproject.toml to add a single set of checks. And this is the Flake8 bugbear rule set. And this contains a whole bunch of looking for small ways to improve the code that are somewhat opinionated most of the time. So I'm going to copy this and then emacs.precommit config.yaml again. And then and that's the wrong file. So I'll do emacs pyproject.toml this time. And when we did UV init, it set up an initial configuration for that. And we're going to add this section to pyproject.toml. So this is the current status of, this is what pyproject.toml currently looks like. So we added a rough rule set. And I will do the website for rough has a list of a whole bunch of different rules that can be enabled. And the one that, whoops, the one that we're going to is Flake8 bugbear. So we're enabling rule set V. So we're enabling all of these different rules. All right. And where was it? All right, so let's do pre-commit, run all files again. And now it said, we have a problem. Do not use mutable data structures for argument defaults. And this is rule B006. So if we do a search for B006, we get to the mutable argument default rule. And function defaults are evaluated once when the function is defined. And then if you add something to X within that function, it's going to be the default value in the default value of X the next time that you run it. So that is a bad pattern. And the way to fix it is to not do that. So in this case, I'll do a git diff, and it was just the pyproject.toml. So let's see, we'll do emacs main.py, and in this case, you have to do a manual fix. And let's just get rid of that. X equals list. So instead of defining it initially, we define it in the function itself. All right. So now we do git status and then git add main.py again. And then git commit -m, and I'll do remove immutable default argument. All right, and everything passed. Okay. So if we go back to pyproject.toml, it's really helpful to enable a whole bunch of these rough rules, though not all of them will pass at once. And so back to the rough rules page. Let's see if I maximize it, if it'll show. No, it doesn't. It used to show the things on the back. but there are some rules that can be really helpful, like one for removing commented out code. If you use Fast API, that does stuff. I don't know what that does actually. Um, Flake8 Bandit is a useful one that looks for security problems. So enabling rough rule set S is also really helpful. And it's worth going through these if you want to set up rough, and thinking about the ones that you do want to add, and usually adding only a small number of rules at a time. All right. So I'll go back to where I was. And oh, right. So if we do want to commit a change that has a pre-commit check failure, we can do that. So I'm going to do the command. And in this case, we don't actually have one, but git commit -n, which is short for no verify, and then -m for the commit message, commit without running pre-commits. And it didn't do anything because I didn't add anything. So git add pyproject.toml, and then commit without running pre-commit. So in this case, none of the checks got run. So there could be an error that we don't find, but we can still do pre-commit run all files to do that. I personally find this workflow to be really annoying. So my usual strategy is to pre-commit uninstall, and then I have an alias that runs pre-commit on all files, runs all pre-commit checks on all files. So if I do PCR, then it will run all the checks. And it's actually using something else, a different, a newer alternative to pre-commit that I'll get to in a moment. But setting up an alias to do this, I found to be really helpful. There's also a handy command to do to update pre-commit hooks. So I wasn't using the most recent version of one of the hooks, one of the repositories, the pre-commit hooks repository. So it changed that. So if we do git diff.precommitconfig, it says it changed the version from 5 to 6. And so this is a nice way to do that, to do updates without having to actually think much about it. And there's a way to set that up to do that on for GitHub repositories also, which I won't get to today. All right. Another alternative to pre-commit. So if I do pre-commit, is this prec tool that I mentioned. So prec is written in Rust, so everyone who works on it is going to tell you it's a lot faster, and it is. And it also uses UV under the hood, so installing packages is a lot quicker. And there are some annoyances with pre-commit. So I do pre-commit run all files, then it's showing everything passed. And most of the time, I don't care that about checks that passed. I only care about things that failed. So let's install UV tool install prec. I'll do an upgrade here. I think that's the right flag. And so it's using the most recent version of prec. And now I'll do prec run all files. Then I'll add this quiet flag. And it did all those checks pretty quickly. And it didn't install because I use that in the alias above. But it also means that it isn't printing out all of the hooks that passed. It'll only print out hooks that failed or if there's like a problem. All right. So running locally, I almost entirely switched to prec, though there's still some nuances that pre-commit is still a bit more, it works more reliably, but most of the time Prec works just fine. 99%, 99.5% I've found in my experience. And they're working on it actively, so it's pretty close to ready to production use, I would say. So thus far, we've done everything locally, and we're done with that. And now we're going to go through the process of setting up pre-commit for a GitHub repository. So we'll go to precommit.ci, and I'll put that link in the chat. So if you have a pre-commit repository, sorry, a GitHub repository that you want to enable pre-commit for, now's a good time to do it. And so there's a thing, sign in with GitHub. We can do that. I'm already signed in, so this should just do it. And I'm going to add an installation. And I want to do this under my own repository. So let's do NA Murphy, and we can select different, like particular repositories we want to enable it for. But I'm going to authorize it for everything just because. And then GitHub Mobile. You're not supposed to see this. Glad I have my cell phone here. And I'm going to go ahead and type this on my cell phone. All right. Cool. Live demonstration of two-factor authentication. And now it's set up so that if I have a pre-commit config file on a particular repository, the pre-commit checks are going to be run whenever I do a pull request to things. So it's usually not that helpful to do it for one's own repositories, but more for packages that you're doing for repositories where you're using the pull request workflow. All right, so let's go back to the tutorial. And at the end, I have a link to a super magical fun pull request. I'm putting in the chat. And this is one where I put in a purposeful pre-commit failure. So let's navigate to that. And at the very bottom, there are a bunch of checks that are failing, but we're going to pay attention to the precommit.ci PR check. And it has a bunch of steps. And then in the run step, it's going through all of these, good, except that there is a rough format error. So what I did was add in a bunch of extra lines. And so pre-commit is saying you have to fix those in order for the check to pass. So I'll go back to the repository, to the pull request, and there is a very handy thing that you can do if you have pre-commit installed for a pull request. Precommit.ci autofix. If I add a comment to the conversation tab, precommit.ci autofix, and do comment, it is going to let's scroll up to that. It's going to do stuff for a second. I'll try refreshing. And it has a rocket ship emoji saying that it did stuff. And it, what did it do? Yeah, so there's a commit where it did an autofix. So the extra lines that I added to make pre-commit fail got removed. And so the autofixes were applied. And this is really handy if you're using rough and a lot of other checks. There are some pre-commit hooks that sometimes when they fail, you do have to make manual changes. But for the most part, I'd say the majority of pre-commit hook failures can be fixed with a by commenting precommit.ci autofix. And the thing that you have to make sure to do afterwards is git pull to get this back to your home repository. So now it's running through stuff, and I'm running way more checks than I normally do. And it's one of the ones that passed. So precommit.ci, I'll scroll down, and everything passed. All right, or was skipped. Okay. So precommit.ci autofix is a very useful thing to remember. And in fact, actually, if we go back to this pull request, or maybe a different one. No, it's not that important right now. I set it up so that when you do when someone submits a pull request to Plasma Pi who isn't a core contributor, it adds like a helpful comment that says like, here's our contributor guide. If you get pre-commit failures, try precommit.ci autofix. All right. So those are the main things. And it's worth checking out a lot of existing pre-commit configurations. So I'll put Plasma Pis in the chat again. And there are a bunch of ones that I find to be worth having in there. Even though some are not really that helpful, like detect private key is like for, I think like Amazon Web Services, which we don't use, but it's very quick to run, so it doesn't matter. And then there's some like ones where it does pretty format YAML files, and there's so much to check GitHub workflows. So these are ones that if they're relevant to you, I recommend using them. And for the most part, you can copy and paste them, though there are some where I say exclude this file for some reason. All right. And then the pre-commit website also has a bunch of helpful hooks, which is you can also get to the rough pre-commit repository from there, and then also a bunch for different languages. So if you want to run pre-commit on shell scripts, you can do it. There are hooks that are helpful, and like ways to check that your GitHub Actions, GitHub workflows are set up correctly. And then if you do a search on the World Wide Web for awesome pre-commits, that'll get you to a lot of awesome pre-commit hooks. So yeah, that is that for today. And if anyone wants to go through the process of setting up a pre-commit configuration for your repository, I'm happy to help with it. I usually suggest adding hooks either one at a time if you have to fix things, or adding only the hooks that passed in a single pull request. Separating things into different pull requests makes it easier to code review each individual pull request. Make sure that all the checks are what you intended. So, all right. So any questions or thoughts?
I had two questions. One was, you mentioned that you find some things annoying. So like, what's the most annoying thing about this for you, and what's the most helpful thing?
I would say I'll start with the most helpful thing. The most helpful thing was setting up the alias to use pre-commit. So I'll demo it again. PCR, and that used prec to run all of the pre-commit hooks. And I think I have PCQ to run only a couple of the hooks. And that actually isn't set up here that well. Okay. But setting up aliases to run pre-commit hooks is helpful. The annoying thing is having pre-commit installed and then having to do the git commit -n, the git commit -- no verify to skip running hooks. I usually like to commit the change and then run pre-commit and save the changes that pre-commit made in a separate commit. which is the workflow that works best for me. But
I can
it's
see how that would like help you see what you're doing against like the pattern. You learn more that way.
yeah, yeah, and um, having to figure out why a pre-commit hook failed, and yeah, it just I personally find it quite annoying.
What kind of thing might a pre-commit change and then change back?
If you have auto formatters that are contradictory, so if you have two things auto formatting Python, um, so like I don't know, auto pep8 and um, or if you have black and rough format both doing and you have different line lengths set up.
Right.
Um,
So
and
just inconsistencies that you've put into the system.
yeah, it doesn't happen very often. I can't remember the last time that it did happen.
Sure, but it makes sense that you could do that.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you too. All right. And like I said, feel free to reach out and I'm happy to hang out on Zoom to set up pre-commit for your repository or help or go through the process with you. All right. Stop sharing. Yay. Now I can go shovel more snow. And Julie, what is the topic for 2 weeks from today? Actually, I might have stepped off for a second. All right. Yeah, that's everything that I have. So,
Nick, I do have a question. So you're doing a lot of this with the Git command line. Have you used this in an environment like PyCharm or Visual Studio where the Git stuff is really tightly integrated into the IDE? And any things we should know about in that context?
um, for things like PyCharm, you can set up a configuration to run pre-commit. And um, I generally don't do that because for some reason, tend to do stuff with the command line. But that can be really helpful. The If you do pre-commit install, um, and you attempt to commit something with PyCharm, then the commit can sometimes fail and the error messages don't show up that cleanly. So you don't really have a good idea of what happened. So um, having it as a separate configuration that you can run is probably the best way to go about it. And then like having a keyboard shortcut for that.
Okay, good to know. Thanks.
And if you're in particular, I don't recommend suggesting that people do the pre-commit install in your contributor guide. So like don't recommend to new contributors to do pre-commit install, but rather I would say do the pre-commit run all file or pre-commit.ci autofix. I would describe pre-commit as really useful and moderately annoying. And my friend Eric says only moderately annoying.
Love it.
It can be quite annoying, but still really helpful. But, all right, Julie, anything for 2 weeks from now?
Not yet, TBD, but see y'all then. And yeah, any questions for Nick or comments or they're blown away by the magicness of pre-committing.
Yeah. Not the most exciting topic, but it is helpful.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. He has a comment for you. Great work on a complex topic.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. See y'all again in about 2 weeks. Topic TBD.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.